day, so there'll be some maybe.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, sorry.
Good morning. Did everyone join?
Thank you for coming on the last Thursday of July. Are we glad we came today and not last Thursday? Again, thank you. My name is Greg Carlson. I'm the president of NYARM, and I welcome all of you and thank you all for being here. I wish that you will all stay to the end. We have refreshments and we have lunch. Right before lunch, I am going to give you some legislative updates. Have no fear. All the branches of government are here and are working to our detriment. With that, I would like to turn the floor over and the program over to one of the best executive directors that I know, Margie Russell.
For the sake of our viewers out on YouTube, this is our summer casual program, so just want to alert our worldwide audience. I'm going to give a quick introduction about the speakers. We have Tom Riley, who is a battalion chief with the fire department, who teaches this all the time. We have Peter Karras, who is with the Durst organization, and he teaches this part of the time, but lives it all of the time. And Alex Weiss, an engineer who thinks about it all of the time. And so with that, we're going to turn it over to them.
Good morning, everybody. I wish everybody doing this morning. As Margie mentioned, I'm Peter Karras, working currently with their organization. I've worked with them for the past 18 years. I am currently assigned at the World Trade Center, the so-called, formerly known the Freedom Tower, and my function there is the assistant property manager. So we are here today to give you a quick overview of the regulations which have changed in regards to supers, handyman, building engineers who need to obtain their Standpipe sprinkler system certifications. As you may be aware, you may or may not be aware, the regulations for the fire department have changed simply because New York City decided to adopt the NFPA code number 25, standard number 25. As such, the multitude of new regulations have been issued and implemented, and it has become sort of difficult for a lot of people to pass the fire department exams. So the goal of today's meeting is to give you an overview of what have changed, what's new, and what it takes now to pass the test. Again, the two most common tests that our supers and handyman and building engineers have to take are the S12, citywide sprinkler system maintenance, and S13, that's for standpipe system. There's also S14, a multitude of other licenses. All of that information, by the way, is easily available on the fire department website, www.ny.gov, under the certificates of fitness. You can simply look it up on that tab. That being said, we'll again be talking about the regulations. So, as I said earlier, the regulations have significantly changed. And again, that's because of the NFPA Standard 25. The regulations are much more complex now, and there are many, many more items that now have to be tested and inspected and maintained as per that code. So I'll let Alicia go into this a little bit more detail right now.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Tom Riley. Like Margie said, I'm the battalion chief with the FDNY, and I teach with New York Fire Consultants. In the back on the table, I put some guides here, which is their personal life safety guidebook. It's they're good little tips on how to get you going. If there's all different areas here, and in the back is that's on the table back there. Like Peter was saying, a lot of the laws, the codes have changed. This goes back to September 11th. The 2008 code came about, tragedies of that day. Because of that, things are stricter, it's more important. As far as the codes, the adoption in 2008, the new code came out, NFPA 25, edition 2002. There's new exams for different types of testing you take. So before, when you had a certain CFF or a standpipe or sprinkler, where you had one, now you're going to need can't hear? I'm sorry. Okay, you're going to need a separate certificate of fitness for the standpipe and for the sprinkler. So the current CFS was up until January of 2012. From that forward, you have to take a new exam. If the fire department comes on scene and you are not current, you're going to get a notice of violation or a violation of the fire department, which of course is going to result in a fine. What I'll do is, Margie put in the book there, she put a breakdown of the new information that you need.
Page 12.
Page 12 in the book. I'm just going to kind of go through it briefly. Like Peter said, ultimately, so many things have changed that if you're not truly versed in this and you're going to take this exam, you may not fare well. One thing alone, I guess, I'm not sure, I think Peter will talk to you about is the reference guide. The reference guide, everything is in there, and if you don't know how to navigate through it, you're not going to be able to look up when things have to be inspected, so on and so forth. So, as far as the Part 10 of the study guide, standpipe system must be regularly inspected by a CFF holder. It should be a visual inspection, and you want to look, is this system free of corrosion? Little things like that, that if you pick this up right away, to prevent the problem from happening. No physical damage to the system, and if there is a problem, it should be corrected immediately. You never know when there's going to be a fire. As far as the valves and connections to the automatic water supply, check to make sure they're in the correct position. And that's where all these logbooks come from. There's all checks and balances. And it's also a CYA, cover yourself, to make sure things are done. We had a fire in Brooklyn in the early 90s. They worked on the sprinkler system, put it back in service, but they didn't put the valves back on. 3 firemen were killed. So that's what changes all these codes and laws. As tragedies happen, things change.
So what Tom is pointing out to you is, it sounds like he's teaching you fire safety, which he is, but he's pointing out the parts of the study material that's important for the exam and giving you some background on why it's in and why it's changed.
That's what I'm going to try and touch base on something, but this is a real brief overview to really get into this whole subject. It's a course. We teach the course at New York Fire Consultants, and it's in-depth course. And in the back I have some business cards and those residential safety guides, and our contact information is on there. So the valves are very important to make sure they're in the correct position. And anytime your system is out of service, whether it's a standpipe, the sprinkler, or if you have an alarm system in your building, the fire departments should be notified. Does everybody know what the impairment coordinator is? Anybody familiar with that term? Nobody knows that. It's a fairly new term. What that means is basically if something is impaired, and the 3 things we're concerned about would be your standpipe, your sprinkler, or your alarm system. There's steps that you have to take. When the fire department gets on scene, we need to know if there's a situation there. So if your standpipe or sprinkler or alarm system was impaired, you would have to tag it, determine what the problem is, determine how long it's going to be out of service for. If it's your standpipe or your sprinkler, and there's a problem with the fire department connection, there's a disc that has to go on there. So when the fire department pulls up, at a glance, we can tell that there's a problem with that system. As far as the impairment coordinator, that would be the fire safety director. We talk about hotels and office buildings. There's one person who has to always be in charge of that, and that is what they call the impairment coordinator. So that person would notice that there's a problem, make the notifications, tag it, disk it, call the fire department borough dispatcher. And when you call the fire department borough dispatcher, they're going to ask you several questions. You need to have answers for them. What kind of a building are you calling from? What's your location? What's wrong? How long is it going to be out of service for? You got to call your insurance company. You got to call the central station if you have a central station in your building. Then once everything is done and repaired, the company comes and takes care of the problem. You have to make those phone calls and notifications again. Check out the system, make sure all those valves are put back properly. Like we said, we had that fire in Brooklyn. The valves weren't put back. Put the valves back properly, remove the tags and the discs, and then make all those same notifications once again. These are all new changes that came about, and Peter will discuss all that. Okay. As far as your fire department connections, that should be checked out at least once every 5 years. You want to do a hydrostatic pressure test on all your connections. Some major defects that we'll be looking for is an empty tank, a break or leak in the system piping, inoperative or shut water supply valve, or a defective fire department connection. These are all things that, when they're not taken care of, when we get on scene as a fire department, we're going to have an issue here, and this is when tragedies happen. So it's extremely important that you're aware of all that and take care of that issue. The date of all your inspections and repairs must be recorded on the inspector record card. There's a card that should be sprinkler inspection card. This should be near your system. Anytime you do an inspection, anytime there's a problem with it, it should be entered on this card. If you see a minor defect, in your system, you should report to the owner of the building. If the owner doesn't correct it, you should notify the Bureau of Fire Prevention within 30 days if it's not corrected. And all that stuff is done to cover yourself and make sure things are done. If you're going to make a notification to anybody, I would do it in an email. Some sort of written notification. This way you have record that you did make a notification. Okay, as far as the inspection, like I said, you put them on the card. Anytime it was done, it should be posted near the main control valve, and you've got to keep your records for at least 3 years. We also have a logbook, and we sell them at the school. A new logbook should be started every year. And in this logbook, it's broken down by your monthly inspections and all different things that need to be taken care of. You need a new book every year, and these records are kept for 3 years. Okay, as far as the bottom of the page, standpipe system maintenance and inspection. The automatic and non-automatic standpipe should be tested and maintained as per NFPA 25 2000 edition. So those are all new codes that came about since laws have changed. Number 2, they're talking about the fire department connection. You should do a hydrostatic pressure test to make sure that it can withstand the water flow that's going to be put in there. All your fire department connections should be properly labeled on the outside. Red should be for your standpipe, green should be for automatic sprinkler, and if you have a combination system, that should be yellow. As far as the gravity tank, the next page, they're talking about the gravity tank. Each week that pump should be activated, and that gravity tank should fill up at 65 gallons per minute. The gravity tank, basically the way it works is similar to a toilet bowl. There's a pump inside there. As the water is used or the water drops below a certain level, the pump will kick in. It's like a toilet bowl when you flush it. The pump will kick in and bring the water back to the correct level that you should have for your building. Buildings have a certain amount of water in their standpipe in their gravity tanks, and then they should have a reserve. So that pump will only go down so far. And the reserve, that is for the fire pump, so we know when we get on scene, there's at least a minimum amount of water for us to fight that fire. each week you should activate your pump. And if there's an automatic controller, you operate the pump, you should reduce the water and show that it kicks in. By reducing the water, the pump drops, it should automatically kick in the pump. If it doesn't, there's a problem. Okay, the next page talking about standpipe systems. You have your gauges, you want to weekly check that the gauge is properly calibrated to ensure the normal air and water pressure is maintained. There's all sorts of inspections which the reference guide will give you all that information. And unless you know how to read that reference guide, when you go down and sit down for this test, you're not going to pass it. And there's like 15 questions on the reference guide. So right off the bat, you lose 15 if you don't know how to do that. The buildings, annually, prior to freezing weather, buildings with wet pipe system shall be inspected to verify that everything is operating. And the important thing is do not expose pipes do not expose water-filled standpipes to freezing weather. It has to be 40 degrees, that's the temperature. There's a lot of things that repeat. 40 degrees would be the temperature for the pump room, 40 degrees for your gravity tank. If you have your building under construction and it's not heated, your piping system is going to be dry. When they had the fire at the Freedom Tower last year, it was on the 91st floor, and it took us 40 minutes to fill all that piping full of water because it's a large building. So that's why in a building under construction, there's no water in that system. Okay, talking about on page 4, talking about the gravity tank. The exterior of the tank, supporting structure, the vents, foundation, catwalks, and ladders shall be inspected quarterly. And the reason, I'm not going to go over all the inspections. It's just that when you see a question like that or a statement like that, that's the way it'll be given on the test. It will say, according to the reference guide, how often is the exterior of the tank supporting structures inspected? So what you'd have to do is know how to navigate through the guide, the reference guide, go through that, and then by drilling down, you eventually get to the answer that will say quarterly. Because memorizing all this stuff gets to be a challenge. Okay, on page 5, pressure reducing and relief valves and pumps. The pressure release valve shall be inspected weekly to verify the pressure does not exceed the pressure which the system components are rated. Letter B, booster pumps. Same thing, that should be inspected, visual inspected weekly. And once again, there's your temperature of 40 degrees. The fire pumps, you should do a weekly visual inspection and make sure all the valves are fully open, free of leaks. On the other side, letter C, talking about the water storage tank. Without a supervised water level, it should be inspected monthly. With a supervised water level, it should be inspected quarterly. Once again, these would all be types of those reference guide questions that it would say according to the reference guide, and you have to navigate through. The temperature, 40 degrees. If you don't have a low temperature alarm on your gravity tank, during freezing weather, you want to check that temperature of that tank water daily. Once again, that should be 40 degrees. If you do have a temperature gauge, they'll allow you to do that weekly. On the other side of that, page 6, talking about interior inspection of the steel tanks. Without corrosion, inspected shall be inspected every 3 years. The interior of all of the types of tanks shall be inspected every 5 years. Page 7, talking about dry pipe valves. valve enclosure, heating equipment subject to freezing shall be inspected daily during cold weather. Once again, it should be 40 degrees. It says Celsius next to that, but it should be 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Backflow prevention assemblies. On your standpipe and your sprinkler, where the fire pump will hook up, there is a backflow that want the commercial, water, domestic water going into that system. That's what that's for. If you have an OSMY, which stands for outside stem and yoke, that should be chained in the open position. The other page, top of the page, talk about fire department connections. Fire department connections shall be inspected quarterly to verify the connections are visible and accessible, the swivels are not damaged, and they rotate smoothly. All this stuff, all these inspections are there that in case there is a fire, that there should be caps on there, that if we have a fire, it's going to work properly. If you walk around and you don't see a cap on, you see what happens. People put garbage in there. Same thing with the fire hydrants. If there's no caps on the fire hydrants, people for some reason think it's a garbage can, they put stuff in there. What happens, we pull up there, there's a fire, it's not going to work, there's going to be a problem. The clappers should be properly operating in your, they call FDC, it used to be called a Siamese, now it's called a fire department connection. Next page, talking about pressure relief valves. Pressure release valves shall be inspected weekly to verify that the pressure downstream of the relief valve fitting to the fire pump discharge does not exceed the pressure in which the system components are rated. If that happens, you could have a break in the pipe. That's the whole idea of keeping the valves properly calibrated. And the bottom, all standpipe valves should be inspected quarterly. Verify that they're in the open position. The next section talks about gravity tanks. This shows a picture of a gravity tank on the front. Basically, the gravity tank, all it is a tank on the roof of your building, and it has water. The way it supplies the water is by gravity. If you have a gravity tank in your building and you open a valve, basically the water is going to flow out. And they can be made of wood, steel, or concrete. And the idea with these tanks is to keep them filled. If you don't keep a wood tank filled, it's going to start shrinking and expanding. You can end up with water leaks. Steel tanks, same thing. Keep them filled, keeps the rust down. And you also have a concrete tank. The way it works, there's no pump. Like I said, the water's just in there. The only pump that's in there would be the pump to refill it. And that pump operates at 65 gallons per minute. If there's a loss of water and that float comes down, it will fill it up at 65 gallons per minute. It talks about the gravity tank being at least 25 feet above the highest standpipe hose outlet. The reason for that is what they call head pressure. If you have a 30-story building and you have a fire on the 30th floor and you open up that standpipe hose outlet, the water is just going to trickle out. If you have a fire in that same building on the second floor, the water is coming out with more pressure because of all the head pressure coming down. When we have a fire in the building with a standpipe, you'll see the fire department come up, they'll hook up to the fire hydrant, they'll stretch the hose from the fire hydrant to the standpipe or the sprinkler, and the fire truck is a big pump. It's going to pump water into that system. Our hoses supply water at 250 gallons a minute. 2.5-inch hose. So the gravity tank, there's no pump there. All it's doing, the water is just kind of pouring out. It's not what we need if there's a fire. That's why we need the fire pumps. The water is a backup. Okay, looking at that diagram, you show the 2-inch fill piping. There's that ball float that I discussed. When the water level drops, that ball float will kick in. There's an overflow, because sometimes the ball float doesn't work, just like in a toilet bowl, sometimes things break. The water will flow out. If you happen to see water flowing out, you know there's an issue. Have that corrected. In the winter, if you see ice forming on the tank, that's not good. Either the overflow is not working or there's a leak in the tank. All right, the next page talks exactly what we discussed about the flow of 65 gallons a minute. The fill pump is not necessary if the water pressure is supplied by the city water main and it's able to keep the tank filled with the correct amount of water. The tank itself should be insulated or heated. We don't want that water freezing. We discussed earlier about checking the temperature of that tank. If you have an alarm during freezing weather, it will be weekly. Without an alarm, you want to do a daily check. Make sure the temperature is 40 degrees. Further on down there, it talks about, like I just said, keeping the tanks full of water. And if there is a problem with your gravity tank, you notify the fire department borough dispatcher. It's not 911. You want to call the fire department borough dispatcher. Every borough has a different phone number, different contact number. The next page shows another diagram of the gravity tank. They show you the gravity tank, and looking at the top, working our way down, you see a check valve. That's so that the water does not go back into the domestic water supply. There's a roof outlet manifold. That would be used if we had a fire on the roof. We would hook up our hose to that roof outlet manifold and put the fire out. If any of your systems are down, whether it's your standpipe, your Siamese, your alarm system, your gravity tank, there's two ways that you're going to protect the people in your building. And the two ways are either evacuate your building, which I'm sure you don't want to do, and the other thing is fire guards. So if you need a fire guard, you can call New York Fire Consultants. We can supply you with fire guards. And they have to be there 24/7 until the system is back up and running. Going down the line there, you see the hose outlet. Every floor has that. That's where the fire department will come in. If the fire was on the 10th floor, we come in, we hook up our hose on the floor below. We stretch our hose up to the fire floor, we put out the fire, and then we send members to the floor above that to search for anybody trapped or any fire extension to the floor above. Going all the way down, you see that check valve once again, and then there's an automatic ball drip going out to the fire department connection. We hook up at the fire department connection, and the ball drip valve is so that there's no water laying in there that freezes. If the water freezes in there, we have a fire, it's not going to do us any good, water's not getting through. Okay, the third part is the part 10 study material. This just gives you inspection, testing, and maintenance excerpts. I said earlier, the standpipe must be regularly inspected by the certificate of fitness holder. Take a mark on that card that I showed you. All the valves should be in the correct position. Notify the fire department borough dispatcher when there's a problem. You should put a sign or a tag to let you know what part of the system's out of service. This is the laws that we talked about. It talks about major defects, empty tank, etc. Minor repairs. If not repaired within 30 days, you report it to the fire prevention. All these things, this is what we discussed earlier. This is just kind of a breakdown of the code. So as far as the new certificate of fitness, a lot of them have been combined. So if you had the S11 now is for residential sprinkler, S12 would be for the citywide sprinkler. S13 would be for a standpipe. And these are the certificate of fitness tests you'll have to take with the fire department. For $25 to take this exam. And then S14 would be for a multi-zone. If this starts in January of 2012, so once your CFF expired, you could not redo it, you have to take the new exam. This is the book at New York Fire Consultants. This is the book that we have, the certificate of fitness, S11, S12, S13, and S14. And that's all covered in our book. And in the back of the book, there's also this reference guide that I was telling you about. When you take this class, you get this book to take home with you. Of course, and there's the reference guide there to help you answer any question when anything is impaired.
So I was just asking a question about where can we take the classes besides going down to the union? I heard there is a place also the fire department has. Do they have all the instructions all over the new certificate of fitness? Because once at the Hypernia Society, we had that talking about it, and there was a fire chief who was saying that if you take the test and you didn't go for any classes, you will fail because of a lot of coding being changed.
Right. Well, that's what I was trying to get to. Like, when we teach this class, it's a full day of class. So, just kind of gave you a brief overview, and basically saying what you're saying is that it's so in depth that you truly have to go to a class. In the back, I have business cards, and there's those residential guides I explained to you, which would have our contact information on the back, and that's where you can take the test. And I think the Hibernian, I think New York Fire Consultants did train some, I think. Yeah.
It's about 34th Street.
Right, we're right, the Hotel New Yorker. We're in the Hotel New Yorker on the 11th
My question
floor.
is, since we have to take these records and change the books, and I was told the book has to be originally purchased from by the department, now with the copies where registries issues. So this is all available. You just mentioned now in our belt. When you look at it, or it has to be in the fire department?
Well, I'm sure there are other people who also sell the book, but we sell them. It's called Sprinkler and Standpipe Inspection Record Book. And it'll have the address of your building, the year. Like I said, you need a new logbook every year, but you need to keep these records for 3 years. Okay. The way it's broken down, the table of contents, fire pump testing weekly and annually, water storage tank during the heating tank season, sprinkler inspection record monthly. For every month you have to do inspection. Standpipe monthly inspection. Standpipe and sprinkler deficiencies. The 3 and 5 year tests, and the NFPA inspection, testing, and maintenance. So it's all broken down in here, and it just helps you keep records of all
It
that.
has to be original, it has to be original.
Yes.
And one more question, I'm sorry.
Just one.
In terms of tagging, because I don't know about this business, but right now I'm finding that, are we supposed to make our own tags, or is it certain tags by fire department we can purchase and just have it on the chain that, is anything like, my concern was, like a couple weeks ago, my neighbors put some kind of sign, rain, it's gone, is there something that's available for us to purchase?
Yes.
During the night to be visible, I don't get it, I mean, it's really not explaining where we should go to. I think this question answered really helpful.
Right. Okay. Yeah, as far as if your fire department connection outside the building was damaged, impaired, you would put a disc on that. And that's plastic. There's not going to be a problem with that. Okay. Once you call the fire department borough dispatcher, the unit that's nearby will come by and put that fire department a disc on your fire department connection. As far as the tags, you can purchase them. The company that do sell them, contact your alarm company, or look it up online and get a company. And there's different colors. Red will be completely out of service. Green means it's okay. Yellow, it's orange. It's all different colors. Right. So if your standpipe or sprinkler is either out of service or partially out of service, it's red.
I'm just learning about that, but I'm concerned with where to get the signs.
Right.
Do they have to be special?
Right, well, like you said, anything, even when you have a building under construction, the signs, you just can't do them in crayon, put them up. They gotta be legitimate signs, they gotta be painted, proper signs. So, yes, you can contact an alarm company, or you can go online online and look them up. You can contact New York
Or
Fire
sign,
Consultants.
or sign company.
Or sign company.
Because- Right, like the font has to be a certain style and a minimum size and all that.
Right.
And the sign companies are right on top of that, just as they have, you know, do not use elevator, go to your stairs. The same sign companies, I'm sure.
And if you have any questions, like I said, I have cards that day. Send an email or make a phone call to New York Fire Consultants, and they'll let you know where you can get those signs from, where you can get those discs from, the books, all that stuff. Thanks. You're welcome. Yes.
Yes. I just have two basic questions. One is there any differential between commercial and residential on these regulations?
Alex, you want to answer that?
Well, I'll go wait,
Yeah, this regulations, NFPA 25 applies to residential and commercial. So there's no, for signs, you have basically the same signs for residential, except like one and two family dwellings, they do not need a Siamese connection. So you wouldn't have. So it's some design concept is a little different for one and two family dwelling. But once 3 family and up, it's considered commercial in New York City. So you would have to comply like the commercial.
Thank you.
Yes, I have a fire that runs with my small detectors, small alarms, and my tampers. How often do I have to get that inspected? Do I need to go records on site? I'm a resident.
Residential.
And I also, I'm a fire department. How often do I have to get that and those water flow alarms and these water inspectors? Right.
Well, in the guide, it tells you how often you have to inspect your pumps, and Peter can answer that question. You want to give more information on that?
To answer your question, it's the regulations have changed so significantly that, the answer simply will be in the S 12, 13, and 14 study guides. And
These guys are
that's
not
what we're going
serious.
to talk about next. As Tom mentioned, the licenses that are most significant today are, I'm going to go over them again. S13, citywide standpipe system. That's S13. Okay. Residential sprinkler system is S11. That's residential sprinkler system. Then we have S14 is multi-zone systems. All of those certifications or certificates of fitness are covered in the fire department on the fire department website. So any certificates you may need for your building, if you are a super, resident manager, handyman, or building engineer requires to obtain any or all of those certifications, you can simply refer to the Department of Fire Department website, and you can look for certificate of fitness tab, and you can look all these regulations up individually for each certificate of fitness. So there is not a quick answer as to what gets inspected, when and how often. Tom has done a very good job of giving you a quick overview. However, this is not a place to give you a detailed information about this. I normally teach the course, as Margie mentioned, in 32BJ for the past 7 years. And the course lasts, for example, the 32BJ lasts for 11 weeks, and it's a 2-hour session once a week. So there is enough information and enough regulations that need to be talked about and learned about for 11 weeks of instruction. So those of you who are able to, send your employees to 32BJ classes, I highly recommend that. Not because simply I work there and it's a great place to be in, but simply because they offer this excellent course in Standpipe sprinkler systems, which does cover any and all requirements that are needed to be learned about for these licenses. So that's if it comes to S12, 13, and 14. What I do want to talk about, what Tom mentioned, is a section of the S12, 13, and 14 study guides. Study guides is the material that anyone and everyone who needs to obtain a certificate of fitness has to be familiar with sufficiently to pass the test. I have students who come to my classes and say, oh, I used to hold the old W12 certificate, and no longer is valid. What do I do now? I went to the fire department, I got a letter from my employer saying that I have the years of experience maintaining the systems, but I still failed the test. Well, you failed the test because the regulations have changed so much that if you do not get yourself familiarized with all those regulations contained in the study guides for S12, 13, and 14, you will not be able to pass the test. And also, as Tom mentioned, a good portion of the test involves the so-called reference guide. I just have a printout here from the fire department website. The reference guide is key to understand because, again, it covers the 3 sections to it: inspection, testing, and maintenance. And this is like the Bible, all the regulations compiled here. And it tells you exactly how often each component and when and by whom has to be tested, inspected, and maintained. So this is key to understand. And guys, again, and ladies who come to classes, I stress this extremely a lot because not only do they have to learn the operation of the systems, understand how water flows from the gravity tank to standpipe sprinkler systems, what type of systems there are, and so on and so forth. Understanding the reference guide is key because you can simply look up and any given component that's going to be listed on the test, and it's going to tell you here what this component is, who can inspect it, and how often it gets inspected. The same with how often it gets maintained, and how often it gets tested, and by whom. So this is key to understand. Again, I know it's not included in this brochure here, but again, you can just go on the fire department website and look it up, and that's where it all is. So key again is to understand this reference guide. People who do not get good understanding of the reference guide that's required for the passing of the exam will not pass the exam. I can tell you that because I have people coming to classes and say, oh, I failed. Well, I know the system, but I failed. Well, you failed again because you may not have understood how to use the reference guide. The reference guide is given to any and every person who takes the test at the fire department. They will hand it to you as an aid for you to help you to pass the test. They recognize that the regulations are so complex these days that people simply cannot memorize all of this. So they give you the reference guide so you can refer to it and find answers to the pertinent questions on the test. One more aspect I want to mention is that Tom mentioned is this person called the impairment coordinator. That's a completely new function which has not existed before the codes were changed and before the NFPA 25 was implemented. It's a key person who will be responsible for making sure that all the fire protection systems in buildings, whether it be commercial or residential, are in compliance. So the fire department person when it comes into the building, they will be looking for the so-called person called now impairment coordinator. Building owner and management by law is required to assign a person who is going to be designated as the so-called impairment coordinator. So you better have such a person on the premises. That person will be coordinating shutdowns with the fire department, reporting them to central station, calling them back if the systems go back online, making sure all the records are in proper order and so on and so forth. In most commercial buildings, the function of the impairment coordinators used to be assumed by fire safety director. The law does not say if the impairment coordinator has to be the same person as the fire safety director. It simply says there has to be a person designated who will be called the impairment coordinator and who will make sure that everything is in compliance. So I just wanted to stress that. And that's a new aspect of this law, which is also covered in the S12, 13, and 14 study guides and similar fitness. They may ask about it on the test as well, because that's a new function that's required to be implemented in buildings. Thank you. Sure. Just come to the mic so I can hear your question, please, and everybody else can hear you.
Peter, I'll just give them the website.
Sure.
Okay. The website, in case you want to look it up, it's www.nyc.gov/FDNY.
www.nyc.gov/FDNY. One more point about the reference guide that Peter was talking about. It's also broken down into 3 sections. The first section of the guide talks about the standpipe. The second section talks about the sprinkler system. And the third section talks about, well, actually 4 sections. Then you have the tags, what color tags you want to put on. And then the fourth part, which is in the back, talks about your alarm system if you have a central station hookup. And depending on what is impaired, that's where you go in the guide. But like Peter says, unless you, it's like reading a map. When I teach the class, and sometimes with young people, and I mention a map, they look at me, they don't know what a map is. Everybody has their iPhone, and that's how they get around. But it's like reading a map. You want to go from here to New Hampshire, wherever you want to go, what road you're going to take. That's how the guide is set up. So if you're not sure how to navigate that, you're going to be totally lost.
But actually, I'd like to do, while I'm asking any questions, I'll actually pass 2 copies of this reference guide, so you guys can quickly take a look at this and see what it looks like. Yes. I don't think the law specifies. It says that you have to have one on premises. I'm not sure the fire code is actually clear. That's not a specific fitness position. It's a person designated to oversee that the building is in compliance with the current requirements as per NFPA 205. That's what they say. I actually read the code, and I don't think it says that it has to be the commercial residential. It's a person designated to oversee that the building is in compliance. Too much work. No, not even. Not even. It's someone in the premises who is designated. The law does not say, to the best of my knowledge, incorrect. That person has to be actually certified in any way. It's again a person who will oversee the operation of the building. Not what I read. Not what I read. It's a person designated.
The building
It may
owner,
become a building engineer. It may become the fire safety director. But I don't think that's listed here in the code that those persons have to fulfill the function of the permit coordinator. I don't think.
the building owner will designate one person to be the impairment coordinator. Basically, the owner, you may own several buildings. You can't be on top of every one of your buildings. So one person in that building is responsible to make notifications and get this system back up and running.
No, it doesn't have to. It could be the building super, it could be the building engineer, it could be the handyman, or any other person that the building owner designates. Again, in the eyes of the law, the building owner is responsible for designating the permit coordinator. If the building owner does not designate the permit coordinator, the building owner becomes responsible.
We have a representative from the school at Thomas Shortman, 33J, and I'm sure what we want to make sure is if an owner designates a building worker as an impairment coordinator, one, they better know about it, and two, what kind of personal liability risk are we taking on as an employee? So from a management standpoint, there's a lot, because I can see some employees saying, I'm not going to take this on, and to what degree is that a direct order or not?
Well, when we teach these classes, Margie, we teach them for the fire safety director, just for an example. Fire safety director for a hotel or an office building. And it's a class that they take, and they take our test, they pass it, and they have to take the city exam and pass that. And then they have to get certified in their building. The city will actually come out and certify them in the building. And we go out to the building to do an on-site training for these people. Then they become certified, they have a certificate of fitness, and they become the impairment coordinator. So there's a lot involved, a lot of knowledge that people should have. And like Peter said, and we both said, taking this exam, you really need, there's a lot of information you need to have. And if anything today, you need to understand how much information is there.
When you're going offline, say, whether you clean a tank or do some minor repairs, and you hire a licensed fire suppressor plumber, is it their responsibility to call the fire department? Your building, was it the building?
That's true. When you go offline, the question was, when you go offline, is it the contractor's responsibility to call the fire department? No, the responsibility is the impairment coordinator's responsibility to make those notifications. Now, when you go offline, let's say you're cleaning your tank, what also do you have to have? You have two choices. You evacuate the building or you get fire guards. And a fire guard, you need one fire guard for each 50,000 square feet. If you have 50,000 square feet at 1 foot, you're going to need 2 fire guards. And they're there 24/7 till that system, whatever the problem was, is repaired and put back in service.
But if there's a problem or you're cleaning the tank?
Right, if you're cleaning the tank, there's no water in that gravity tank. If you're working on your sprinkler, it's not working properly. And I can tell you things happen any time of day and night. So just make your notifications and call your fire guards and make sure your building is protected.
Part of that, anytime your system is out of service for any period of time, the permit coordinator becomes the responsible person for making proper notifications.
Is there a cost for this impairment coordinator? If I hold a CFF and they're not teaching us about this, how do you know about this other than how?
Well, when
you
you
take-
the similar fitness study guides spell out the function of the permit coordinator, and they tell you exactly what he or she has to do on behalf of the owner. It's spelled out in the beginning of the study reference guides for the similar fitness, for the test.
On the new test?
On the test, for S 12, 13, and 14. It's spelled out in there. If it's not detailed in there, it's in the fire code, which can be looked up online as well.
Yeah, I just want to get some clarification on multi-buildings. I manage multi-buildings. When we take the exam, do I have to take the exam for each building, or does one exam cover the multiple buildings?
It is usually, or always, I should say, each building, each site needs its own certificate of fitness, person who holds certificate of fitness for that specific building.
Exactly right. Like when we do, like I said, going back to the FSD classes for the hotels and the office buildings, a person can come in, take the exam, pass everything, and then get certified in property 1. If they want to work in the other property, same thing. They have the fire department comes down and tests to the examiner and certifies them in the other building. So that's what Peter's saying. Wherever you work, it has to be for individual address.
Even though it's under the same,
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
title?
Each building, it's building specific certificate of fitness. They call the building specific certificates of fitness. So each building has to have a responsible person certified.
Right, but does he have to take a test down at Metro Tech for each building, or just have the fire department come to that building and certify him on site?
You may have to take the test because each building has somewhat unique, different fire protection systems. So
we're
even the
gonna-
test may be the same questions in the fire department, you still have to certify that he's familiar with that particular building.
Okay, so we have to find out for sure.
What do you,
Yeah, depending on whether it's a standpipe, sprinkler, multi-zone system, whatever the type of system you have, and even if it's the same, you're still going to have to know, you can't also, if you're working in one building, you can't be in 2 buildings at one time.
Even if they're side by side?
The side by side, that'd be a different story, but you still have to, be qualified and certified in that building.
Okay, so we're going to have to end up with more clarification on this because, as we know, there's certain restrictions on one superintendent, multiple buildings as far as HPD is concerned. So, one certificate of fitness, how many buildings?
Isn't that where the SW12 stands in, or the SW13, which is like a nationwide one?
we can't hear you, I'm sorry. We cannot hear you.
It's like, would that be where the SW12 or the SW13 comes in? Where one of them is nationwide and one of them is...
There is S12, S13, S14, three main ones.
Right.
So there were 2 of them. One is citywide sprinkler system, one is citywide standpipe system. and one is a multi-zone. So citywide means it covers any and all systems within New York City buildings. That's what citywide means.
Wouldn't that cover a multi-building, like if he has 8 buildings in the same block?
Again, we don't want to give you this information. As Margie said, we may need to get some more information on that. But from my knowledge, you usually need a separate certification for each building.
Wow. That's,
What you talked about was the W12, is
Yes.
that what you're saying? Now that is the S12. That's what happened. When they changed it, the new C of F, they have to take an exam for. They're not going to renew that W12, which started in January 2012. You have to sit for a new exam, which is now S12. Yeah. That's what that means.
can't hear you.
Yes, for the fire department and central station. It's a parking lot, let's say, on the 18th floor. The rest of my buildings have to charge. Do I still need fire code?
Yes. You still have to notify the fire department. That's law, or you have a choice. You could evacuate that 18th floor or put a fire guard. Two choices, that's all you have. Fire guard or evacuation.
But just for that floor, but the rest of the
Right. If the rest of the building is covered, that's fine. It's the problem when it's not operational, that's when the issue comes.
I think we should check for this because I believe there is a limitation. If there is a few hours a day,
Well,
it
there-
is fixed, then you may not need to notify the fire department.
Right, okay.
So there is a directive or a memo on this, and we have to get back to research that. So I believe that there is some, if you can fix your system within a couple of hours, same day, then you may not need to notify the fire department. But if it extends into more than one shift or in 2 days, you need to notify the fire department.
What Alex is talking about, and he's correct, if that maintenance, repair is going to be less than 8 hours, does not affect more than one floor, you make all your notifications, you still have to do the same thing, evacuate or get a fire guard, you call the central station, you call everybody else, the only person you don't call will be the fire department borough dispatcher if it's less than 8 hours. But everything still has to get done. Tag it, disc it, central station, everybody is notified. You just don't call the fire department borough dispatch, because if you walk around Manhattan or any borough, you see all the work that's going on. That's the only person that's been eliminated is the fire department borough dispatcher. Further, with that, for the first 4 hours, you can be the impairment coordinator. You can be you as the impairment coordinator can act as the fire guard. If it's going to be for 8 hours, for the other 4 hours, you're going to need a fire guard there on that 18th floor. So for the first 4 hours, you're okay. After that, you're going to need fire guards up there. That's the clarification of that.
And to add further to this, there are buildings are classified as partially out of service and fully out of service. This would be an example of a building system, that's partially out of service. That actually makes a whole lot of difference in the type of notification that needs to be done to the fire department and so forth. And again, all of that is spelled out in the S12, 13, and 14 study guide. The persons who are trying to get the certification, they need to know that.
Good time to transition. Alex, talk a little bit about lightning protection, and then we'll go into spontaneous combustion and fires that like to start with flash. Yeah, Alex, you can.
Thank you much for inviting me to this forum, and thank you all for coming here. My name is Alexander Weiss, and I'm a professional engineer in New York State, practicing in New York City. So I will say a few words about lightning protection, and then at the end I will also return to the standpipe because it's so important and there's a lot of questions. So I provide a little clarification and would like to also direct you to the fire department website, which all your questions most likely can be answered right on fire department website has lots of information about the certification program and what is required for each building. So lightning protection, it's very important. It's like few dozen of people, person die every year in the United States from a lightning strike. And in addition, there are billions of, at least $1 billion damage a year from lightning strike. And also, lightning strike is not only like fire or loss of life, it can be also interruption of communication, and all the electronic devices can be affected by direct strike or indirect. Because lightning induces an electric surge in the lines, even if it doesn't strike it directly. So this is a natural event, and we just need to know about it as much as the science knows about it today, and then we can manage it. So one thing to know that lightning strikes starts, usually you have we call it thunderstorm, and we have clouds, and the clouds and the earth creates a potential, electric potential. The clouds have a charge, positive on the lower, negative on the lower side of the clouds, and positive on the upper side of the cloud, and then it induces a charge on Earth's surface. Now, naturally we have some charge, but on Earth's surface, but it's so dispersed, so we don't feel it. But when the cloud starts to accumulate a charge, so it induces certain areas start to accumulate more positive charge, and that's where the potential starts for a lightning strike. Now, in areas, lightning strike, can be predicted where it actually could strike, but it can happen any place. The lightning protection does not provide 100% protection, but close to 99.9. If it's properly protected. So most, you can expect a lightning strike on tall buildings, right? If you have a tall building and a low-rise building next to it, so most likely that low-rise building will not be affected, because the taller building will actually attract that lightning strike. And also chimneys. You have a metal chimney on the roof, and usually it's extended about the roof level. And it's also can be a hazard, but if your metal chimney on the exterior wall is grounded, so you don't need additional lightning protection for the chimney. So, but just you have to make sure that the base of the chimney is grounded and is properly grounded in accordance with electrical code. Okay, so like flat roof usually have perimeter wire protection, which is then connected all the way goes a wire down the exterior building. Sometimes, because I will just explain that there is a few types of lightning protection installations. One is just to run you have an air terminal. It's like a rod. For flat roofs, the rod will be like 10-12 inch long, and it will be wired all the way and bounded to the ground rod. Okay, so this is for buildings, usually for running exterior wire down is for not low-rise buildings would be more appropriate. And usually when you have a building, you would have at least two wires connected the air terminal at the ground. And like flagpoles, like structures like flagpole, you would need only one lightning protection wire cable grounded to the ground. On roof, whichever ridge, you would run also air terminals connected with a wire, and extending it, and also we have to run it down the building at least in two places, and usually diagonally across the plane of the building. Now, there are structures, metal frame buildings. So if the metal frame extends above the roof and it has a continuous metal contact, so all you need is that metal frame is grounded. And usually it has every second column or something must be grounded. This is all described how to install lightning protection is in an NFPA 780. NFPA 780 tells you how to install the lightning protection. And also it shows you how to determine how much of area will be protected by your air terminal rod on a roof, or because of the height of the rod about the tallest point of your building will depend how much area will it will be protected. With wire connected all these air terminals, you get a larger area protection, but it doesn't mean that you need to do it all the time. You always have to work with an FPA 780 to determine which type of protection is appropriate. Now, there are problems you have concrete buildings also with reinforced steel rods, okay? And if the steel rods, if you build the building and you make the bonding between your concrete elements, bonding of the steel rods, and it continues from the roof all the way to the ground, it is grounded. So then it works as a lightning protection. But if you don't have continuous connection between the rods in your concrete elements, then it doesn't work that way. And one of the problems with the pre-stressed concrete, you have pre-stressed concrete, and most of the time the rods in a pre-stressed concrete, they are not continuous. And if the lightning strikes, then it can damage the strength, damage the pre-stressed concrete, and it could be a problem also. So these buildings should be also properly, the lightning protection system must be properly designed. Now, for in each building, for every system in a building, there must be a maintenance plan. And if you have a lightning protection in a building, you have to have a lightning protection plan too. And what that lightning protection plan should state that what should be the actions of the occupants in a building in case of thunderstorm, or you get in the news that weather news that a storm is expected. So what do you do? So if you know that, so obviously the building windows must be closed, because lightning can enter through the openings in the building. So the building openings must be closed. You don't use your radio antennas or TV antennas on the roof. So it's better to turn off these devices. Stay away from electric outlets. Do not use any extension cords, and wait till the storm is over. how long you have to wait until the storm is over. So scientifically, it's shown that 30 minutes after the last strike you saw, if it is safe to go about your business or go on the street or walk. So 30 minutes after the last strike you saw, it would be safe. But within 30 minutes, it's still dangerous. Now, for so I just said that some personal protection. So if you are on a street or something, try to get inside the building. Don't look for a shelter under the tree, because you know, if you have taller structures around so it most likely not strike the tree, most likely strike this taller structure. But I say there is no 100% guarantee. So the advice is that don't seek shelter under the tree. Also, open structures. Sometimes you think, oh, you don't want to get wet, so you stand under the structure which is open on the sides. It's not a good idea. You know, so it will protect you from the rain, but it may not protect you from lightning strike. And I just came across one thing which I didn't know myself, that if you are on a beach, you know, and you see the stormy clouds, you know, it's better to leave the beach, and obviously you don't want to go home because it may not happen, and so you just want to see. So it's the best thing is to get in your car. Walk to your parking where you park the car, you get in the car, close the car, and that will be your protection. So sometimes people say, oh, the car is a metal car. But if you are in a car and the doors, windows are closed, it protects you.
I want to get back a little bit to the plan that building owners have to have. If we have a lightning protection system, or because you had said we need a plan if we have a lightning protection system. So if we don't have a lightning protection system, we don't need a plan, or was that just the way?
It's a good question. You know, just Tom said that there is a literature on the table which you can pick up on the way home. You have to have your personal, not only, it would be good to have for any business to have a plan and to include this NFPA 780. There is a list of what you should do during a storm. And it is a good idea to have for everyone, but obviously if your building does not require, because your building is in an area where it's unlikely to strike, and not all the areas in the United States are prone to lightning. So you have to know if you have often lightning strikes, then you have to have a plan. And you have to know what to do during lightning, and you have to educate your employees. Or if you are at home, you have to educate your family how to behave during the storm. So, thank you, Margie. That's a good question.
Yeah, because this is going to take a lot more exploration, because if there's building damage and, God forbid, life and limb damage, and the question is, well, it's in the code. If you have a lightning protection system, one, you have to have a maintenance plan. Well, most buildings don't even know that they have a lightning protection system, or that it's impaired because of the rod's not connected. So this is something that we're going to have to take a lot further.
Yes, Margie. Now I go to the second part, and I will address this. So now you have a lightning protection system, right? You hire the contractor, and he will do for you a lightning protection system. And so, as I mentioned earlier, every system must be maintained, because nothing can stay forever the same way as it's installed. Because It's man-made system, and it will deteriorate. So you have to have a maintenance program for it. And the maintenance program starts first with installation, then you call a UL certified, Underwriters Laboratory certified installer or tester, and he will test your system, and he will check for the proper installation of the system, and UL will issue a master label certification. UL is doing this since 1923. So the building will have master label certification for your lighting system, and I believe you have to renew it in every 5 years. During these 5 years, you have to maintain the system. Somebody has to be responsible to check for the rods if they are corroded or they are damaged or they are disconnected, and have a logbook of these inspections. So when the inspector comes in, you say that you have it checked and maintained regularly. So this is very important, maintenance. Very important to have certification of the system, because some systems are installed, but for some financial reasons, you know, because it may cost quite a couple of $1,000s to get the certification of your lighting installation, a lighting installation system. So, but if you get the certification, then you know I believe it's good. You may get credit for your insurance company because you have the proper installation, you have proper certification, and you have maintenance program. So these are important things, and there are a lot of other things. You know, how you ground your lighting protection, because you don't want concentration of the charge in the ground where people walk. So usually the rod extends like 8 feet below the ground, but you have to know the characteristics for your ground, if it's how much resistance it has to electricity, and based on that, you will choose the method of grounding, because there's a few methods of grounding. One is just to run a rod right into the ground. One can be over the surface, extending the surface in circles, but it's very important to get a specialist who will review it and properly ground your property, because improper grounding may cause injury and death as well. So this just remember. Then if you have now, so you can also go on a website and put in search master label certification for lighting protection, master label certification for lighting protection, and you also can be certified by UL to do these inspections. You know, you can be certified if you wish, or your employer can, finance your certification program, and you can obtain certification, and you will provide the services for your building. So UL and NFPA, these are the two agencies which will cover the installation of the lighting protection system. Okay. If you have question, I would be glad to answer it. And yes.
Is there a particular trade that URL certifies? Is this an electrician that would come and do this installation and check it? Or is this something separate and apart from any contractor we may currently be using?
I believe that, it should be an electrical contractor who is certified, because this subject is electricity. So somebody who is certified to inspect the lightning protection system must know the basics of electricity.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I recently had an elevator modification in my building, and we did put one of the 8-foot rods inside the basement. However, we ran into a sewage pipe. So we had to redivert and find a place, a clear area to put that through. It's also, I think you may have not mentioned, but you have to also be 6 inches above ground, penetrating into the...
Yeah, the question is that there was running, the wire running down to the basement inside the building.
The rod.
A rod, and there was a sewer pipe in a way. So then you offset it and you went down the ground.
Yeah, we found a clear spot to put that through.
And how deep?
8 feet.
8 feet. So now you have to know that you have to know how the charge will spread in the ground if if you have concrete foundation around and you have limited volume of earth or the dirt, it's limited volume something, you have to really know how the charge will disperse there. You know, otherwise, you know, you have to know. So the charge should not exceed something dangerous level in the basement. So, and another way, if you bound it to the water service, I believe it will be much better. So you have to consult with your lightning protection installer and check it out and see if, you know, just see if there is proof of that the charge will disperse around. And if not, then you have to see if you can bound it with a water service pipe.
Okay, we're going to be coming to the final parts of this. Alex, did you have any closing things on this?
Yeah, on the sprinkler standpipe. Again, you know, there are a lot of questions which, particularly about the certification, which building it is, what certification, and everything. I think just put it a search, fire department certifications, and it will guide you right to the certifications, go over the requirements, and it will tell you when you need the certification, for which systems you need certification, and you know, just spend a little time. But obviously, Tom, I think, will be happy to help you if you send him an email. If you send an email to Tom, he will help you, or he will give you a website directly guiding you to the place where you need specific information. What's that? Now, just to give a short overview of sprinkler standpipe design. So for 1 and 2 family, we have NFPA 13R, NFPA 13D for dwelling. NFPA 13D is the design for sprinkler system for 1 and 2 families. Okay. Then NFPA 13R is designed for sprinkler system in residential dwellings. NFPA calls it from 4 families and up. But in New York City, this applies for 3 family and up. 3 family and up. Now, and I believe that 3 family up to 6 family. NFPA 13R, 3 family up to 6 family. And then when goes over 6 family, then NFPA 13. NFPA 13 applies to commercial and storage, residential, more than 6 families. Now, when you design sprinkler for residential occupancies, even you have high-rise building, So maybe the corridors and public areas will be designed as commercial space, but individual apartments will be designed per NFPA 13 for residential portion, because they will be used residential sprinklers which have a lower water flow when the commercial sprinklers. Yes.
One last question. Yes, Beverly.
So if these buildings are over 100 years old, 20 families or less, with mixed-use commercial basement, the landlord is expected to spend money in retrofitting the sprinkler system into this building? Because it will
The question is if you need to install sprinklers in buildings where you don't have a sprinkler system. Now, there is no rule that you have to install a sprinkler system, except that for high-rise buildings, commercial buildings, you need to install, you need to comply with the law, and you need to, if you don't have it, you have to install it. This is the law. And now, when it comes to residential buildings, if you do substantial alteration to the building, it's the fire code. The fire code would require you to install sprinklers if certain substantial. They have description of what is substantial, and fire department has a rule that if the street has clear road of 39 feet. That means that standard street width of 60 feet minus 2 sidewalks of 15 feet. It would be only 30 feet road clear for the traffic. Then it comes in that rule, and it requires you to install sprinklers, no matter what type of building is that. 1 family, 2 family, 3 family, or commercial or that. So when you have substantial alteration, maybe more than 50% of the cost of the building. So then you may, fire department rule may apply, and you will need sprinkler system. But otherwise, if you don't have a sprinkler system, you don't change certificate of occupancy, you don't need to install it. Now, if you change the certificate of occupancy, then for apartments and up, they have to have a sprinkler system. But in the future, since the New York City code is based on international code, so in the future we may expect that we will need sprinklers in 1-2 family and up, because that's the international code accepted the NFPA 13D. So we may see in the future most of the buildings sprinkled. Just the last one is now all the maintenance of all the systems should be an NFPA 25. Now, most sprinklers, some sprinklers are supervised. Some sprinkler system and standpipes are supervised. If you have a fire alarm in your building, or you need a fire alarm in your building as the code requires, then your sprinkler system and standpipe must be supervised by a third party, by a telephone line. And also, I think connection, I don't know if you still need connection to the fire department, but it should be supervised. If you don't have a if you don't need a fire alarm system in your building, so your system may be supervised only locally, like you have local alarm, and it's supervised by your building personnel. So each is a sprinkler, each standpipe must have an alarm bell, and it's usually mounted on exterior of the wall with a sign. If alarm bell sounds alarm, call fire department, and that's what usually happens. And that's what I'd like to just clarify on sprinkler. Thank you very much.
fast, Tom, some spontaneous combustion issues, and then we're breaking for lunch. But this whole changing the C of O, and then you have to put in a sprinkler system, that worries me because we know about any number of alterations in our buildings that require to have the C of O changed. And often management says you can do anything you want, so-called, as long as you don't have to change the C of O. But often we let a lot of these large alterations, turning a roof into a penthouse. And so does that mean you have to now put sprinklers in the whole building? So there's a lot going on here. Tom.
Okay, as far as spontaneous combustion, I had a short video I wanted to show, but we don't show videos here. And basically what the video I wanted to show you was how fast a fire can take off. We talk about the fire guards, and when we train the fire guards, we tell them to only extinguish incipient fires, small fire. We train them on how to use the extinguisher, and you aim the extinguisher at the base of the flame. Everything has its ignition temperature. This desk, the chair, the rug, books, everything has a different ignition temperature. And a piece of wood, a 2x4, and a 2x10 is different ignition temperatures. And the video I wanted to show you was that how the older buildings, everything was made of wood. So when we had a fire years ago, we would pull up, it was single pane glass, the glass would break, we knew where the fire was. The newer buildings, the glass is now, because we're worried about energy conservation. The windows are thermal pane. They hold the heat in more, they hold the smoke in more. And also everything is made with plastic. Plastic is what? It's made with fuel, petroleum-based products. Whenever you see a fire on TV, you see us working on a fire, what do you see? Heavy black smoke. It could be just this one chair burning, but it creates heavy black smoke because has oil in it. So spontaneous combustion, once you start something on fire, if this room was on fire, everything would start heating up, and once everything hits its ignition temperature, that room would flash into flame. Everybody saw the movie Backdraft, how the fireman was searching around, the fire kind of goes out. Because what happened, you need three things for fire: fuel, heat, and oxygen. Once in that backdraft movie, the oxygen was used up. Once the fireman opened the door, the oxygen got to the fire and it flashed back violently. And that's how things ignite. Everything heats up to a certain temperature. Once it gets that temperature and sustained, it's going to take off. For you people, as far as spontaneous combustion, everybody's doing their floors over with polyurethane. And throughout the year, we get several fires. People come in, they'll sand down the floors, they come in and they put the polyurethane down, and maybe they shut off the pilot light, but they just shut down the refrigerator. What about the bell? Somebody comes, the refrigerator kicks in, or the thermostat kicks in, or somebody rings the bell, guess what? That spark could be enough to start that fire. And we pull up many times, and the people are in there working, and when they're burnt because the room was filled with fumes, it flashed. The fire just flashes and goes out because there's normally nothing in that room. All the furniture's been removed. They're just sanding the floors down. But they're in there, it flashes, they get burnt, and then the fire goes right out once it eats up all the fuel. So as far as the spontaneous combustion, when you're doing that, you got to be very careful of those rags. Even the sanding machine itself, be careful of that. All that sawdust is inside that bag. You got to be careful with that. Shut down all your ignition sources and have it vented. And be aware that the fire department will go for a lot of odors in the building. People leave everything buttoned up. We get there and there's odors in the building. And we'll ask, is anybody doing any work? And once we get there, we'll find out it's the low floor that will be done.
I would like to add, if your technician comes to the boiler room, and fixes an oil leak, and then puts soaks up oil, fuel oil, which spills on the floor, and then cleans up, put it in a garbage bag, and seals it, and then puts it in a can, for the garbage truck to pick up maybe next week. But this is a source of spontaneous ignition, this source of fire. You cannot store the oily rags in a closed area, in a can or in a garbage bag. So you have to dispose it properly. this is a source of spontaneous combustion. And also, it can happen like if you have outdoor fuel tank, gasoline tank, must be grounded. If the tank has volatile flammable liquids and has a vent, that source of vapors, they also can ignite during lightning. So these issues also must be addressed for proper fire protection. And always remember that a firefighter comes to your property to save life in case of emergency. And we want to keep the firefighters safe too.
Thank you for saying that, Alex. I appreciate that. That's true. And exactly what I was saying, any sort of oily rags, do not put them in the garbage can. Linseed oil, anything like that. Even if you cut your grass and you put your clippings in the garbage can, if you go back to later on, you'll feel how that can, everything is heating up. It's all part of that combustion, it's heating up. Yes? Two certificate fitness holders? Somebody has to always be there. Same thing when we, like hotels, I get back to that, just trying to give you an analogy. We train the people in the hotels to have a fire safety director on duty, all 3 shifts. 2 o'clock in the morning, if we come into that hotel, they're not there, they get in a violation. Same thing, if we come there and there's a problem and there's no CFF holder, there's going to be a violation. Somebody has to be there to take care of business when it's out of service. Make those notifications because we're protecting the people in that building. That's what it comes down to. Well, somebody has to be there because what happens if it does go out of service? Are those steps followed? All those impairment coordinated steps? The person that is there should know what they should do.
Well, it certainly sounds like the need for best practices because there's so many overlaying and overlapping regulations. Now, thank you, Tom Riley, Edith Harris, Alex Weiss, and thank you all for coming out in the middle of the summer. September 17th at the Hotel Pennsylvania, 33rd Street and 7th Avenue. We're there all day with more fabulous seminars and food, breakfast, lunch there for all the attendees and the exhibitors. So please join us there. So you need to take some classes. You need to encourage your entire staff. You don't want to be the only one who's in the know on this, and especially you want to be able to take a little vacation time. So thank you all, and